Hi, welcome to Listen2Riches. Today I am going to talk about the summary of Thinking Fast and Slow by Daniel Kahneman. We will explore how our actions are guided by two distinct systems and the connection between them. Our behavior is influenced by two separate systems, one that acts automatically and another that thinks things through. Picture it like a movie script unfolding in our minds, with two main characters, plot twists, and suspense. System 1 is our impulsive, automatic, and intuitive side, while System 2 is our thoughtful, deliberate, and calculating side. These two systems are in a constant tug-of-war, affecting how we think, make decisions, and behave. System 1 is like the quick reflexes that kick in when you hear a sudden loud noise. Without even thinking, you instinctively turn your attention toward the sound. This is System 1 at work. It's the part of our brain that operates spontaneously and without us even realizing it. It's a remnant of our evolutionary past and has survival advantages. On the other hand, System 2 is responsible for our individual decision-making, reasoning, and forming beliefs. It deals with conscious mental processes like self-control, decision-making, and focused attention. Imagine you're searching for a specific person in a crowded place. Your mind concentrates on the task, recalling the person's characteristics and blocking out distractions. This focused attention helps you find the person quickly. If you lose focus and get distracted, it becomes harder to locate them. Now, let's consider the relationship between these two systems and how they shape our behavior. The main idea here is that our tendency to take the easier path, or mental laziness, can lead to errors and hinder our intelligence. Take the classic baseball and bat problem as an example. A bat and a ball together cost $1.10. If the bat costs $1 more than the ball, what's the price of the ball? Most people quickly think it's 10 cents due to System 1's automatic response. But that's incorrect. It's actually 5 cents. Your impulsive System 1 jumped in too soon, thinking the problem was simpler than it really is. It didn't want to bother System 2. This illustrates our natural mental laziness. When we use our minds, we often opt for the least effort, following the principle of minimum effort. If System 1 thinks it can handle something, it won't bother engaging System 2, even if it leads to mistakes. However, using System 2 is essential for our intelligence, and we'll explore why in upcoming summaries. Research has shown that when we practice tasks that require deep thinking and self-control, it can boost our intelligence. Think about it this way: if we had used our thinking skills, System 2, to double-check our answer in the bat and ball problem, we could have avoided making that common mistake. But when we're lazy and don't engage System 2, our intelligence suffers. Now let's explore another important concept: why we don't always have complete control over our thoughts and actions. Imagine seeing the letters SO_P without any context. It probably doesn't trigger any specific word in your mind. But what if you saw the word eat first? If you looked at SO_P again, you'd likely complete it as soup. This phenomenon is called priming. Priming happens when exposure to a word, idea, or event brings related words and ideas to mind. For instance, if you saw the word shower before eat, you might complete the letters as soap. Priming affects not only our thoughts but also our actions. Hearing certain words or concepts can influence our behavior, and it happens unconsciously. This shows that we aren't always in conscious control of our actions, judgments, and decisions. Instead, we're influenced by social and cultural factors. For instance, studies by Kathleen Voss have shown that thinking about money makes people more focused on themselves and less likely to rely on others. This suggests that living in a society with a lot of money-related influences can steer us away from being altruistic. Another key idea is that our minds often make quick decisions based on snap judgments, even when we don't have enough information to make a rational choice. Imagine meeting someone named Ben at a party who's easy to talk to. When someone asks if you know someone willing to donate to a charity, you might consider Ben, even though you know very little about him. This is the halo effect in action. We tend to oversimplify situations and make judgments based on limited information. Confirmation bias is another mental shortcut. It's our tendency to agree with information that supports our existing beliefs. For example, if we're asked if James is friendly without any other context, we're likely to assume he is because our minds automatically confirm the suggestion. Both the halo effect and confirmation bias are shortcuts our minds use for quick decisions. However, they often lead to errors because we don't always have enough information to make accurate judgments. Our brains fill in the gaps with false suggestions and oversimplifications, potentially leading to incorrect conclusions. These cognitive patterns, like priming, happen without us consciously realizing it and impact our decisions, actions, and choices. To make quick decisions, our minds rely on shortcuts called heuristics. These shortcuts help us quickly understand our surroundings, but sometimes we overuse them, leading to errors. Two common types of heuristics are the substitution and availability heuristics. The substitution heuristic occurs when we answer a simpler question instead of the one presented. For example, if someone asks, "How effective will this woman be as president?" but our minds automatically replace it with, "Does she look like a good sheriff?" This means we may judge a candidate based on an unrelated mental image, like what we think a good sheriff looks like, instead of considering her qualifications. The availability heuristic is when we overestimate the likelihood of something based on how frequently we hear about it, or how easily it comes to mind. These mental shortcuts can sometimes lead us astray when applied to situations where they don't quite fit. Think about this. Strokes cause more deaths than accidents, but a study found that 80% of people believed accidental deaths were more likely. Why? Well, it's because we often hear about accidents in the media, and they leave a strong impression on us. We remember those terrible accidents more easily than deaths from strokes, and this can make us react in the wrong way to these dangers. Here's another important idea. Why do we struggle to understand statistics and end up making mistakes? Well, one helpful way to predict whether certain events will happen is to remember the base rate. This means knowing the basic numbers that all other statistics are built on. Imagine a big taxi company with 20 yellow taxis and 80 red taxis. The base rate for yellow taxis is 20, and for red taxis, it's 80%. So, if you want to guess the color of the next taxi you'll see, you can make a pretty good guess by remembering these base rates. But in reality, many of us forget about the base rate. We tend to focus on what we expect to happen rather than what's most likely. For example, if you've seen 5 red taxis pass by, you might think the next one will be yellow, just for a change. However, the chances of the next taxi being red are still around 80% if you remember the base rate. But we often get it wrong because we focus on what we hope to see. Ignoring the base rate is a common mistake when dealing with statistics. We also have a hard time remembering that everything eventually goes back to the average. This means that in any situation, there's a typical or average status, and any unusual variations will eventually return to that average. For example, if a soccer player usually scores 5 goals a month but scores 10 in September, the coach might be thrilled. However, if the player goes back to scoring 5 goals a month for the rest of the year, the coach might be disappointed. But in reality, the player is just going back to her average performance, and it's not fair to criticize her for that. Let's simplify and rephrase the content for better clarity. Our sixth essential concept, known as the past imperfect, delves into why our memory of events isn't as straightforward as we might think. Our minds don't remember experiences in a simple, step-by-step manner. Instead, we have 2 distinct memory selves, each with its way of recalling situations. First, there's the experiencing self, which records our emotions in the present moment. It asks, "How do I feel right now?" This part provides a more accurate account of what's happening because it's in the moment. Then there's the remembering self, which stores information about how an entire event played out after it's over. It asks, How was it overall? This remembering self isn't as reliable because it shapes our memories once the situation has ended. The remembering self tends to dominate our memory for two main reasons. 1. Duration neglect *. This happens when we focus on specific memories from an event and ignore how long the event lasted as a whole. 2. Peak end rule *. This rule highlights that we often put too much weight on how an event concludes. We remember the end of an experience more vividly than the rest. To illustrate this, consider an experiment involving people's memories of a painful colonoscopy. Participants were divided into two groups. One group went through a lengthy, drawn-out procedure, while the other group had shorter procedures but with increasing pain as it went on. You'd think that the people enduring the longer procedure, feeling pain for a longer time, would remember it as worse, right? Well, that's what they felt during the procedure itself. When asked about their pain at that moment, those with longer procedures did indeed report feeling more discomfort. But here's the twist. When the remembering self took over after the procedure, those who had the shorter procedure with a more painful ending remembered it as the worst experience. This study perfectly illustrates how our memory can be influenced by duration neglect and the peak end rule, making our memories less accurate than we might believe. Our seventh key concept, the power of mental focus, is all about how shifting our mental focus can profoundly affect our thoughts and actions. Depending on the task at hand, our minds use different amounts of mental energy. When we're in a state of cognitive ease, we don't need to put much effort into paying attention. This is when our intuitive system 1 dominates, making us feel creative and content but also more prone to making mistakes. In contrast, when we're in a state of cognitive strain, we become more aware, and our logical system 2 takes over. We may be less creative, but we make fewer errors. The cool thing is that we can consciously influence the amount of mental energy needed to achieve certain mental states. For instance, if we want to make a message more persuasive, we can promote cognitive ease by repeating the information. Our brains respond positively to clear and repeated messages. On the flip side, cognitive strain can help us overcome challenges, like solving difficult problems. Exposure to confusing information or hard-to-read text can put our minds on alert and energize us, making us less likely to give up. Now, let's talk about how the way information is presented can shape our thoughts and actions. The way we're given information about probabilities can significantly impact how we evaluate risk. Small changes in the wording or emphasis of a statement or question can lead to different responses. For example, even when the probability is calculated precisely, expressing it differently can change our perception. People might see a rare event as more likely if it's described in terms of relative frequency rather than statistical probability. Here's an interesting experiment to illustrate this. Two groups of psychiatric professionals were asked if it was safe to release Mr. Jones from a psychiatric hospital. One group was told that patients like Mr. Jones had a 10% chance of committing a violent act. The other group was told that 10% of patients like Mr. Jones were estimated to commit violent acts. The second group was more likely to oppose his discharge. This shows how a slight change in wording can affect our judgment. Now, let's discuss the essential concept 9, the role of emotion in decision-making, and how we make decisions as individuals. For a long time, some influential economists argued that we make decisions purely based on rational arguments. They believed in something called utility theory, which says that people consider only rational facts when making decisions and choose the option that brings them the most benefit. For instance, according to utility theory, if you like oranges more than kiwis, you would prefer a 10% chance of winning an orange to a 10% chance of winning a kiwi. It sounds straightforward, doesn't it? But here's where it gets more interesting. These economists, often associated with the Chicago School of Economics and scholars like Milton Friedman, suggested that people are ultra-rational decision-makers, valuing goods and services based purely on their rational needs. They also assumed that people evaluate their wealth rationally, considering only the utility it provides. But let's dig deeper. Imagine two individuals, John and Jenny, each with a fortune of $5 million. According to utility theory, they should be equally satisfied with their wealth. However, what if we knew that John started with $1 million and Jenny started with $9 million before both ending up with $5 million? In this scenario, it's unlikely that John and Jenny would feel equally satisfied with their $5 million. This shows us that there's more to how we value things than just their utility alone. Emotions, past experiences, and individual circumstances play a significant role in our decision-making process. In this final key concept, we explore why we sometimes make odd and seemingly irrational decisions, which don't align with the rational ideas of utility theory. Instead of always making decisions purely based on reason, emotions often play a significant role. When utility theory falls short, the author introduces an alternative called prospect theory. This theory challenges the idea that we consistently act rationally when making decisions. Let's consider two scenarios to illustrate this. In the first scenario, you're given $1,000 and must choose between receiving a guaranteed $500 or taking a 50% chance of winning an additional $1,000. In the second scenario, you have $2,000, and you must decide between a certain loss of $500 or a 50% chance of losing $1,000. If we were entirely rational decision makers, we would choose the same option in both scenarios. However, that's not what typically happens. In the first scenario, most people opt for the safe choice, while in the second, they lean towards taking a risk. Prospect theory helps explain why we make these choices. Two factors come into play, both related to our aversion to losses. First, we place different values on things based on benchmarks. The starting point, whether $1,000 or $2,000, affects how we perceive our situation. In the first scenario, $1,500 feels like a win, but in the second, it seems like a loss. Our judgment is influenced by our starting point, even if it's not rational. Second, we're impacted by the principle of diminishing sensitivity. Going from $1,000 to $900 doesn't feel as bad as going from $200 to $100, even though the monetary value is the same. Similarly, the perceived loss going from $1,500 to $1,000 feels larger than going from $2,000 to $1,500. Now, let's delve into the essential idea 11, the influence of mental images. This idea talks about why our minds create complete mental pictures to explain the world, even though they can lead to overconfidence and errors. Our brains naturally rely on cognitive coherence to understand things. We build detailed mental images to make sense of concepts. For example, we have mental images of different types of weather, like a scorching sun for summer. When making decisions, we consult these images and base our assumptions on them. The problem arises when we put too much trust in these mental images. We often follow them even when data and statistics suggest otherwise. For instance, if a weather forecast predicts a cool summer day, but your mental image of summer says it's scorching hot, you might still wear shorts and a t-shirt and end up shivering outside. This overconfidence in our mental images can lead to errors. However, there are ways to make more accurate predictions. One approach is reference class forecasting, where instead of relying on vague mental images, you use specific historical examples to make better predictions. For example, think about what you wore the last time you experienced a cold summer day. Another way is to create a long-term risk policy that outlines specific actions for success and failure. By preparing and protecting yourself with evidence-based decisions rather than relying solely on mental images, you can make more accurate forecasts. In the case of our weather example, this might mean bringing a sweater along, just in case. In this final summary, we'll wrap up the key theme of the book, Thinking, Fast and Slow. It uncovers the existence of two distinct systems within the human mind. One operates almost instinctively, requiring little effort, while the other is more deliberate, demanding our full focus. Our thoughts and actions shift depending on which of these two brain systems takes the lead. Here are some practical takeaways. 1. Repetition strengthens persuasiveness. ***. The book emphasizes that repeated exposure to messages can make them more persuasive. This effect likely stems from our evolutionary history, where repeated exposure to things without negative consequences felt inherently positive. 2. Beware of media influence. ***. Unusual events, especially rare statistical ones, often get extensive coverage in the media. The book warns against letting such overreported events disproportionately influence your decisions. While disasters and other events play vital roles in our history, vivid depictions in the media can lead us to overestimate their statistical likelihood. 3. Mood affects creativity. ***. Your mood plays a significant role in how you think. When you're in a good mood, your intuitive and quick-thinking system tends to take the reins. This system fosters creativity because the analytical part of your mind relaxes a bit. In conclusion, thinking fast and slow sheds light on the intricacies of our thought processes and decision-making. It's a reminder that our minds are not always as rational as we might assume, and that understanding these cognitive quirks can help us make better decisions in our lives.